Welcome back to National Science Week. I'm Daniel Pizarro from the Parliamentary Press Gallery in Canberra. My first guest is Professor Hugh Taylor. He's a Melbourne Laureate and Harold Mitchell Professor of Indigenous Eye Health at the University of Melbourne. He joins me now. Professor, thank you very much for agreeing to participate in the forum. Why did you go into a STEM field in the first place?
It's hard to sort out sometimes how one's life choices sort of move. But I enjoyed being a Boy Scout and I enjoyed doing first aid. And I thought, well, maybe being a doctor would be a good thing to do. And so I got into medicine. And and of course, to do that, one needed to have some of the science and STEM backgrounds of maths and chemistry and physics and so forth. And then I thought I'd rather become a surgeon rather than a physician or a GP. And I thought, well, neurosurgery is pretty interesting. But then I learnt about some of the very exciting things about ophthalmology, about eye surgery. And at that stage, it was starting to a lot of new developments. It was the first area to start using lasers, the first area to start doing microsurgery. And of course, restoring sight to the blind is almost biblical in its impact. And so I found eye care and ophthalmology a really interesting challenge at the time that brought together a lot of different components. And I've done it now for, 50 years and love it.
Why should Indigenous students study STEM?
The subjects, physics and chemistry and stuff and maths were things that you needed to have to get into medicine. But I was thinking that I've also done a lot of stuff with those tools subsequently. I did a lot of work on, obviously with mathematics in terms of epidemiology and statistics and looking at what are the distribution of causes of problems. So I'm using maths and statistics every single day. I did quite a lot of work, funny stuff on climate and UV and the effect of UV light on the eye. And again, that's got physics and it's got geography and it's got obviously a lot of mathematics. At the other end, we've also done stuff with other engineering challenges, developing instruments that were portable or that we could take out to remote communities. And then also spent a number of years working on a bionic eye with some very clever, very sophisticated microengineers and stuff like that. So that even though one is a doctor, you're also using a wide range of STEM issues. And I think that to solve so many of our problems, whether it's the basic public health with the understanding of the epidemiology and the statistics and components through to some of the technical things. The STEM subjects is a great challenge, and I think it's the sort of thing that it's a great career for women and for we really do need to make sure we get Indigenous, young Indigenous people into this area so that they can really provide the leadership and the two-way learning that the rest of us need as well.
Can you tell us about the eye condition trachoma? I know that you have researched and studied it for many years.
Trachoma is a blinding eye infection caused by bacteria, Chlamydia trachomatis, that gets spread from one person to another. And it used to be very widespread in mainstream Australia, but disappeared about over a century ago. And it occurs in areas where there's poor hygiene and the frequent exchange of infection, particularly from one kid to another. And the key to trachoma is to make sure we stop that transmission of infection, which comes from the infected eye secretions. So the step to do that is to keep every kid's face clean. And to do that, you've got to make sure that the kids are able to wash their faces as well. So we've been working on in outback Australia on the issues around clean faces and strong eyes for the message for the community. And the message for the service providers is clean faces and safe bathrooms. So they've got to be proper repair and maintenance of the washing facilities in the houses and in the schools and so forth. But the other point is, while trachoma occurs in the remote areas, one of the things we found with one of our surveys, and again using the scientific methods and maths and statistics, that the unmet need for eye care is the same in the towns and the cities as it is in the most remote areas. So it's not just a question of the hygiene, it's also the question of cultural safety, accessibility and availability of services, utilisation of services. So while we keep thinking about the problems in the remote areas, we've also realised that there are equally very significant problems and issues that face the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who live in the towns and cities as well. And that comes from scientific research.
Why do we see similar health problems in urban areas?
In the most remote areas, obviously we need to get more optometrists and more ophthalmologists, more services out there. But at that time, the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service in Fitzroy was literally, across the road from the Royal Victorian Eye and Ear Hospital, the largest eye hospital in the Southern Hemisphere. I mean, it was less than a mile away. And all we had to do really is get people to go back and forth across Victoria Parade. So we looked at this in detail. Again, more scientific research and a lot of community consultation to collect information, to look at what was the patient journey or the pathway of care. What happened from somebody recognising they had a problem with their eye, seeing somebody in the Aboriginal Health Service, being referred to an optometrist or sitting on a waiting list for an ophthalmologist or surgery. And we said it was like a leaky pipe. There were lots of cracks or leaks along the way. And if you only fixed one or two things, the pipe was still leaking. So we came up with 42 recommendations of things that needed to be addressed to fix the problem that formed our roadmap to close the gap for vision.
Professor, are we closing the gap in 2020?
In terms of overall, things are improving, but they're still terrible in many, many ways. But one area I think that really stands out is the great success we've had with eye care. Trachoma, you mentioned, we've taken from being over 21% in the kids in the remote areas in 2008. It's now down to less than 4%. We've halved the amount of blindness in the Indigenous people. We've increased the number of eye exams more than threefold and so forth. So there's been some major successes in improving eye care, provision and eye health for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So it really is a success story. We've still got more work to do and we're pushing to get the full funding and the full services, but there's some really good progress.
Has the pandemic disrupted your work, Professor?
A lot of services that have been put on hold where communities have been closed so that the exams can't be done or waiting lists, surgical lists have been suspended and so forth. But there's also been a lot of planning and arrangements that continue and being made. And of course, in the outback areas, there's actually a synergy between the trachoma hygiene and the COVID-19 hygiene messages. I mean, you can't wash your face without washing your hands. And so we've been building on a lot of our hygiene messages that we've developed in the health promotion around good hygiene that has really been working very well with the COVID-19 interventions.
What advice would you give those who may be interested in studying a STEM field?
There's a quote from Louis Pasteur, who was the guy who invented, bacteria or identified bacteria, who we talk about with pasteurisation with milk. But he was studying how beer was made and when he first discovered bacteria and yeast. But he said, chance favours the prepared mind. And you don't know what you're likely to do or where you come, but if your mind's prepared and the opportunity presents itself, seize it. So I would say study those STEM subjects, the science, the mathematics and so forth, because It's a really exciting world and future ahead of us. And if you're well prepared, you'll be able to see some very exciting things. I mean, I've had an extraordinary career just following the things that I've done. And a lot of it is being charged, but most of it is based on a sound STEM basis.
Professor Taylor, thank you very much for speaking to us.